Hi there. I'm so happy that you can attend and check out this panel. We have some really exciting speakers today. This event is about virtual concerts, so the intersection of music and the future of it in connection to immersive technology. For those of you that are already interested in this subject, you know how exciting it is, you know how much is being done and how far we've come. For those of you that are brand new to talking about the entertainment and media industries and how they do overlap with immersive technology, you have some of the best minds in the industry here, and I'm so excited. I'm so honored to be able to moderate today. My name is Darragh Dandurand. I'm a creative director and strategist. I'm a journalist covering immersive technology for VR Scout and a few other publications. And I'm a curator that works in terms of different museum exhibitions, working with different festivals for programming, all to highlight the work of immersive technology artists, emerging technology, and new media. So today we have Amy LaMeyer, Eric Wagliardo, and Andrew Melchior. I just met Andrew today. Eric and I spoke recently, and Amy is a lovely friend of mine. So we're really excited that they're here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And because of the subject, how about three of you tell me one of your favorite musical artists or some people in the industry that are just kicking butt that you love? Start off. How about you, Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy LaMeyer. I'm a managing partner of the WXR Fund. We focus on VR, AR, and AI-based companies that are investing and have a female in the leadership team, early stage, seed stage companies. And I've been in the immersive space for 4 years, an angel investor in music and tech companies for about the same amount of time. I do a blog on a monthly basis of immersive music news, and you can find me on Medium.
Eric?
Eric Wagliardo. I'm a creative director and founder of a boutique creative and production company that specializes in music and entertainment. And I've been working in the musical space for a while now, as well as XR, and have about a 20-year background in marketing and advertising. So I've got a diverse background that includes developing and production. And I've been working on some fun projects, like most recently an interactive music video for Childish Gambino in partnership with Google to show off some fun augmented reality technology.
And last but not least, Andrew.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Melchior. I'm a CTO of Massive Attack. I'm producer of Björk's VR album she released last year. I've had about 25 years of experience in music and technology. I ended up working with David Bowie in the late 90s on a lot of his web-based activity for EMI. And in the last few years, I've advised people like Magic Leap and a number of other companies who've gone from seed stage through to being acquired by major tech companies for audio.
So wait, none of you guys mentioned your favorite artists. I'd love to know, who are some of the people that really inspire you in the industry? Or coming from music, who are some artists that you just love listening to that you think are being really innovative with technology?
I guess I'll jump in there first. I think Flume has always been a big favorite of mine just because I love the vibes. I think musically, what's interesting for me is probably just a lot of stuff that WaveXR is doing. The stuff they did for the weekend was a lot of fun. And just the way they've been able to get that out there and be the right people at the right time to provide just some really interesting content in a world that's been locked down.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I loved the Reggie Watts experience run-in that was done by Intel Studios. That was at South by Southwest last year. I'm also really excited for Stageverse. They've partnered with Muse, and that's coming out later this fall. So that'll be that's one to watch.
Definitely.
As far as artists go, I think I've been really interested in some of the work that's been developmentally done by Aphex Twin and his sidekick, Nikki Weirdcore. He's been doing some really interesting AR-style visuals live and working with some interesting touches that are sort of moving the mixed reality space into the live performance space and working with LiDAR and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I think from a technological point of view, Adam Arrigo and the guys at Wave, I think really pushing the envelope. I think with regard to what Adam's up to, I think that's really helping educate artists as well in the understanding of how to get their work translated. So those are the kind of things that are ticking my boxes at the moment. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think for people listening, especially if they're unfamiliar with this industry or the industry overlap, I should say, having those reference points to go check out the really cool stuff that's going on is always so great for after this talk. But let's jump into it because the three of you are here, and pretty serious question right off the bat. I mean, the music industry and the technology industry is completely changing because of the pandemic. This has obviously affected everything, but we have to see some silver linings. For all three of you, how do you feel like the future of music and technology and entertainment in general is changing because of the pandemic? What are your predictions?
I might have a go at that. Interestingly, I'm a bit of a history buff, and my grandmother remembers Al Jolson singing The Jazz Singer as one of the first recorded music soundtracks to a black and white film. And I remember her telling me the story when I was a kid, saying that, you know, one minute you were having to go to live performances, to bandstands in parks, to concert halls, to listen to live music. And then suddenly overnight, everything changed, and you had this recorded medium and the voice, and suddenly everybody was buying discs. And there was a movement away from live performance through to recorded performance. Now, what's interesting is, having seen the full wheel turn there, is that especially from file sharing onwards in the late 90s, and music becoming very ubiquitous and almost like a utility, like a water turning on and off, the reverse has happened, and everybody's gone away from recording back into live performance. So we're in a kind of unfortunate juxtaposition where everybody's relying on live performance because of the concert experience of being there with your friends and the tribal thing. But obviously with COVID and the restrictions and the profitability of venues plummeting because of the restrictions on numbers and just the viability of that, I'm feeling like similar to how the gramophone and the Berliner disc disrupted the experience of musicians way back in the 20s, 100 years hence. And I think technology is having to step in again and change the model and the dynamic between artists and audience. So, which is exciting, because I think in some ways we were almost being forced into it, because a lot of great minds are currently stood in front of computers, having nowhere else to go, and thinking about how these problems can try to be solved and to be made palatable for general consumption.
Definitely.
That's awesome. There's nothing like a captive audience to be able to change hearts and minds.
Yes.
I think, yeah, I remember when Amy and I were preparing to speak at South by Southwest a while ago. I was really bummed out and really sad when the festival was canceled. And I was a little bit down on the state of affairs. And Amy actually sent me a really encouraging text message saying this might actually be the golden era for music and technology. So that really shifted my mindset, because there was so much doom and gloom. To be able to flip the script and have something positive to think about is actually super cool. And having worked with a lot of brands, the brands are not always excited about funding projects that are experimental. And now they're kind of forced to. So the money, the willpower, and the hearts and minds are all kind of pointed in the same direction. And that's kind of a rare confluence. So yeah, this is actually a pretty cool time.
Yeah, and not only for the artists and the brands, but the consumers themselves, right? We're now in a virtual world. We're accustomed to interacting virtually, and I'm not saying that when we can, we won't go back to live shows. Absolutely, I'm going to every single one. But there will. But at that point, we will also have this virtual content and be used to the consuming music and music type experiences virtually. And so we will have both. We will have the best of both worlds.
So from that perspective, how do you feel like fan experiences need to change? And I'm asking that very deliberately, because there are a lot of people building incredible tech. There are a lot of people that are ready for the future, especially those of us that are interested in futurism, those of us that work in emerging industries. But for most fans, I don't think that they know what's coming. I think that they're just moving with the times, trying to accommodate all of this and trying to keep up with their favorite artists. What do you think needs to happen in order for fans to adopt emerging technology inspired experiences in the music industry?
Can I jump into that one real quick? I think
go.
What I say might be, just kind of poking the bear for Amy and for Andrew. So I think what's interesting is there's been so much fun and emphasis around like virtual reality and augmented reality and just XR in general. But what was fascinating for me was watching people like WaveXR pivot into being a streaming model, where they were trying to get to a mass appeal very quickly, because not everyone has the hardware. And so I think it's interesting from a consumer behavior standpoint. I think people still do want to have these kind of virtual concerts, but have them in a familiar setting, whether that's putting Tomorrowland up on like a big screen TV and having their friends over for a private viewing party, But there has been a huge uptick in sales for like the Oculus Quest and stuff. So I'm not as bullish on VR. I do think AR is and mixed reality is looking super cool. But I do wonder how this stuff is going to kind of bend the kind of current status quo, as opposed to users just jumping headlong into a completely new engagement model or user engagement model.
Sure.
I thought some of the interesting things happened during the first lockdown, like Zoom parties. I was privy to, it's terribly middle class, but I was privy to a bunch of us buying the same wine and listening to music, and we all had to drink at the same time. It was like a kind of post-modern, slightly dystopian, but it was fun because we shared an experience and we were listening to a soundtrack. We hacked a radio station together that we were able to listen to synchronized music. I think small groups listening to playlists is interesting. Similar to, again, without being a history nerd, the idea of during the Second World War, there's people listening to the wireless, and you were unable to go to concerts because of blackouts and bombs raining. Well, in the US it was different, but in the UK, bombs raining down at nighttime, so no lights, no concerts, no opera, whatever, and you listen to the radio. And I feel like because of the COVID situation, groups of larger than numbers 630 or whatever it is at the moment is disallowed. I feel like hacking some of the tech together is definitely happening. A couple of my friends at the BBC have been working at trying to understand how to link speakers together. So in our homes, we now have multiple devices with multiple speakers, and there's various things happening from a kind of interesting sort of distributed spatial audio perspective, where people are using what they've got in their hands to try and synchronize. And I feel like to try and harmonize a bunch of different devices and to try and almost like the dream of Java, to try and harmonize things and get everything on the same beat is interesting. A friend of mine called David Smith is working with a company called Croquet. And Croquet are doing, they're using a system called Reflectors with super low latency capabilities and predictive analytics. And you're able to literally get onto the same beat. If you open a browser window across multiple devices, you literally get on the same beat. And it feels to me there's some disruptive innovation going on that will hopefully hack the consumer experience to a point where, yeah, we'll have small groups of people coming around and sharing that experience while we can't all get together, waiting for that time we can get back together.
That's pretty cool. I was talking to a local concert venue where I've been locked down this whole time in Dallas, Texas, and they were trying to hack together Zoom so that they could have concerts with like 5 different band members all performing from their private venue. But there was such a crazy sync issues, so they were really scrambling to try to find a way to put in a time code or just figure out a way to hack it together. And so I think there's a lot of people putting their heads together from all different sides of this equation.
Yeah,
my friend Tim is a DJ, Tim Exile. He has a company called Endless, and he's been basically working out how you can share the writing of music collaboratively, so loops and things. And he's got this nice, similar to the iOS ability to play across the general MIDI for multiple devices on iOS, but the idea of trying to get onto the beat and sharing the creation process of loop matching and stuff like that. So I think adding some creativity and agency in with the music is quite interesting as well. Not so much agency you lose the thrust of the writing of the musician and the artist, but enough agency to maybe interact and do some remixes and things like that is fun as well.
I know, Amy, it looked like you were trying to say something too before. Do you have thoughts on this?
I mean, just in general, right? You've got somebody like Jacob Collier who's literally lagging himself physically in order to be able to match and play with other people. I think these technologies, the ones that you've mentioned, Andrew, are super useful to continue the creativity from a virtual perspective. But just to go back to the fans and how, connecting with fans, the thing that being virtual and again, not necessarily virtual reality, but virtual in general allows us to do is interact with artists in a way that we didn't before, right? One of my favorite things in the pandemic was a British artist I know called Ed McFarlane. He would get on Instagram Live every morning at 7:30 and play some vinyl. And we would chat and talk about it. And we did it for 100 days in a row. And it was amazing. And he, during that time, he created some songs and he put them on Bandcamp. Like those sorts of experiences are things that would have never happened before the pandemic. And I think that relationship of artist and fan will continue to want to grow. And it'll be different than it was when they were just performing for us on stage, right? And so I think we'll see some creativity in that space.
So between the three of you, again, where you uniquely sit between these two industries, this is a two-parter question, but it's the same in that if you are talking right now to, say, a tech startup that really wants to work with musical artists and push that needle forward, what would you say to them? Like, where do they need to be? How do they need to be thinking? And on the flip side, how would you talk to musicians who are trying to also push their concert, their musical interactive experiences further? What kind of thing? Because I'm sure that there are people on this call that are looking to move ahead with that, and it's a question of what's possible, where are we going, and what resources might they need? So if any of you have thoughts on that, I'd love to hear either side of the coin.
So my first piece of advice is to just consume what's out there and just be inspired by that, right? Because if you're starting from nothing, if you're starting from the basics or what we had, right, then there's like a little bit of a learning curve and something just to be inspired by things like the Bjork VR experience or the Pharos AR experience with Childish Gambino, and just see what's been done and let that for some creative juices.
Awesome.
I would say the same thing. You need to. Sorry, after you, Eric.
Oh no, Andrew, go for it. You're on a roll.
I was. Am I? I was going to say the same thing. It's you've got to sample everything that's out there really as much as you can. But what's interesting, it reminds me of the similar dilemmas around building websites in the old days when you sat there and went, oh my God, we have to have a website, the cost of everything else. Well, no, it's just part of the mix. And I feel like AR and VR and spatial audio and binaural broadcasts and nonlinear, procedural stuff that's happening, I think that's great, but it just is an addition to. I don't think anything gets removed. I think things get added to, and it feels like it's an accretion rather than a replacement of things. And so, yeah, to Amy's point, to sample what's out there and to try and get your experiences up as much as possible. And I think also on the flip side for artists to be able to do the same thing, but also to look at some of the emerging tech and to try and understand the zeitgeist of what's going on with the technology companies. I feel these days you have to be more of a Renaissance mind than ever as an artist, because you have to take in multiple elements to your work, and to be an artist scientist is definitely the way of the contemporary world, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's an awesome word, accretion, because I really do think there's a bit of like a cosmos kind of swirling around right now where I would say don't be afraid to experiment, because there is like a plethora of different ways to approach this, whether you want to be on social media and just get out there immediately, or you want to partner with a technology like an individual shop, or like a big technology firm to do something like, say, a VR project, or to experiment with something new like doing some volumetric capture, doing something that is a big, heavier lift in a bigger production, or all the way to the other end of the spectrum, like Tomorrowland, where that was like a Hollywood production. So I think just that openness to experimentation, where you could literally pick up your phone and start doing some kind of Instagram social push all the way to the end of the spectrum. So I think just kind of find what's right for you, and if you're an artist or fans, to try to engage with them in a unique way. The thing that I keep hearing back on my end of the equation is what's the business model? So I think there is still a lot of questions about how is the business model pivoting, because the technology is cool, and they're like, wow, I don't get it, but that sounds really cool. But then they kind of want to say, like, how is this going to replace the tour? The tour's canceled, and how is this going to sell tickets? Is it pay-per-view? There's just a lot of questions about how do we solve a pivoting business model, not just what's cool, because there's a lot of cool stuff out there.
So I tried to, just as an exemplar for that, I worked with the DJ Seth Troxler and recently, and we did an experiment with AR markers. So he had a side project called Lost Souls of Saturn with Phil Moffa, who's the guy he works with. And the artwork for the actual album was, it looked a lot like a sort of a cube structure, a crystalline cube. What we ended up doing was creating an AR marker out of that, so that when you used your phone across the logo, you could have content that wasn't available on either Spotify or Apple Music. It was on a lone server. But then we took it one step further and we 3D printed that object. And if you actually own the 3D printed object, which is only 100 of those, you are entitled to additional extra content that was not available on traditional outputs. And we felt that, I kind of stole that idea from The Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie, the bit where he puts the orb on top of the pyramid and the music starts playing. We thought that what was interesting was that you somehow replacing the vinyl experience. So you're not collecting vinyl to put on a record player, you're kind of creating an aesthetic thing, which is a sculptural object, and having some form of ownership of a physical thing that sits in your house. and that is the door that is open to unlocking other material that is not available widely. And so I think those kind of experiments and having room to play and having sandboxes to try these things out with like-minded individuals is great. And to rapidly move through the process of doing that and create small tight teams to iterate and keep an artist's interest, because, you know, for the greatest will in the world, having been a recording musician myself, sitting there and waiting for things to set up and microphones to be placed and drum kits to be tuned and this, it's like, oh my God. So you have to kind of sometimes, to avoid the fatigue that sometimes sets in with projects, make sure you can run dynamic teams that are elastic and can keep everybody excited, because good stuff happens, you know. So.
Definitely. You bring up something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I think many of us that work in emerging tech do, which is mitigating expectation, especially for audiences that are used to, you know, smartphone technology that seems to effortlessly work without too much effort because they've trained us well, but the big companies that sell it to us. That being said, for immersive technology, and Amy, actually, we just spoke on a panel together a few days ago, and we talked a lot about this, which was you can't expect emerging and immersive tech to be exactly the same as this mainstream technology that everyone has, everyone's using, everyone's used to. She also really brought up a great point. I'd love for you to elaborate on this, Amy, on this panel, the difference between virtual events and immersive events. You know, they're two very different things, virtual reality versus virtual events. And momentarily, please jump in with that. I bring up all of this to say, I want you guys to talk about challenges. I think a lot of the immersive technology industry are people getting hyped, evangelists, all of that is great. I definitely want it to win, but we have to be honest about our challenges too. We have to be honest about the hows. How do we even do this? How do we pull it off? What are the things that don't work? So Amy, if you could talk a little bit about that, and then all three of us, or all three of you could go into some of the challenges that face both virtual and virtual reality experiences.
Sure. So I guess virtual to me is not in person. So that is, you know, what we're doing here today. Virtual reality is it's a little bit broader of a definition for me, and I can't remember who said it earlier, but maybe Eric, how the wave was pivoting from, you know, truly immersive headset-driven performance to being more web-based, right? So for me, VR and AR and extended reality in general, sometimes referred to as XR. There's a spectrum of immersion on there. And Andrew was talking about Magic Leap. You know, Magic Leap is also a headset, but it's not an immersive one. It's not closed, right? You're not completely transported into another world, but you're instead having digital content on top of reality. And even that, the Sigur Rós experience for me was very immersive. Even though I could see my cats walking around and my home, it was still immersive because of the way that the content was created, and in particular for me, the way that the audio was created. And so I just think there's this spectrum of what immersive content can be, particularly with music, because it's so resonant. Even Pharos AR, so that was an experience that Eric created, where you're using your phone and you're looking at your phone and all of the rest of the world exists. But there was a part of me that connected with it so closely because the music and what I was seeing just drew me in. And so there's a level of immersion there as well. You asked a question about challenges, and you know, there are certainly many of them. I mean, let's be clear, Zoom meetings are not perfect, and that's technology that's been around a long time. So I just, you know, to whoever said it earlier, I think we need to experiment, and I think that we need to just continue to try and be creative and be accepting of the things that work and those things that don't, and just keep pushing that creative boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of parlaying off of what Andrew was saying about being elastic, being able to try things very quickly. I think one of the interesting things from the challenges I'm working on my end is being able to move as quick as the virus is and as quick as the changes are coming in. Because we were geared up to do some experiential physical builds where there was going to be kinetic art and sculptures and virtual reality pop-ups in real life at a venue with real musicians. And then, that was canceled. So they're like, "Oh, we're going to do it virtually." But then, their idea of virtual was to do it in a Zoom call. And then, well, actually, it wasn't step two of the virtual. Step one for the virtual was actually they were going to have a concert venue with band on the stage, just no audience. And then a very hard shelter in place came down, and so we couldn't even do that because we couldn't get the crew. The venue was not allowed to open to even let the crew in. And then we were, trying to default to some kind of Zoom virtual event. So I think trying to be able to pivot quickly enough has been one of the bigger challenges for me. So I think, I'm not sure about you guys, but just being able to try smaller things. And I think a lot of the bigger brands are, pivoting financially because of canceled events and things like that. And so they're not always willing to experiment. But sometimes the small, rapid iteration where you can build in more like a software development kind of fashion, where you have, like the beta, the alpha, the beta, and then some kind of, MVP, and then you're out there in the world. Not all people want to take those kind of risks. So the more you can be nimble, the better. Not to say that waiting, tomorrow wasn't worth waiting for. So I'm glad that they took their time to make it really big. So I think some of the challenges I'm facing is just those ever-evolving constraints.
Thank you for being open about that.
My thoughts on that are, I think the really important thing is the interface design and the user experience. One of the things that was obvious when we made the Björk VR album is to people who'd never done VR, was the on-ramp for them to understand how they controlled where they were, where they could look around. But what was fascinating to me was, for instance, we did a touring show with her. So we not only did we do the VR album, but during the process of making the album, we toured a thing called Björk Digital. And HTC very gracefully loaned us 60 Vives, which was, I think, was the most number of Vives in one place at the time, which was about 4 years ago. And we took that around the world, and we had about 400,000 people go through this experience where we had Björk's films, we had her VR experiences, we had her tablet album, and we had the experience of watching people from the public come into VR, and it was amazing, really, to see some of the reactions, which was obviously there's incredulity and the ooh and the ah, but what was fascinating was people didn't move around or move their heads. They were looking straight ahead. And so we started using tricks like, staging tricks, like she'd be over there and you'd hear a sound over here and a light over, just to get you to move around in this thing. And so I found experience interesting for the onboarding and user experience and user interface design. I had the great privilege of having a number of chats with Don Norman, who was one of the guys behind the original Apple OS 7.5 or something. And he wrote a book called The Design of Everyday Things, and is still a maven in user interface circles. And he and people like Doug Engelbart, who obviously did the mother of all demos and designed the mouse and things, are great proponents of the fact you need strong design. So it's great making amazing content for audio and visual and concerts, but the onboarding has to be easy, and the interface has to be fluent, and some of the most basic things have to be viable and obvious and lucid for people. Because I think, for instance, looking at some of these more exotic immersive festivals and things like that, where you're asking people to load a browser or to download an extension and that feels like very CB radio ham kind of days. It doesn't feel like mainstream. It feels like as soon as there's some friction between me and getting what I want, a lot of people just zone out. So I think everything goes hand in hand, and it's for the big companies like Sony and Apple and the hardware companies like even people like Sonos and those guys to come up with easy usable hardware and tools and user interfaces that make this stuff second nature to use.
So related to all of this, curious your thoughts on the other side of the music industry. Here we've talked a lot about the fan experience, the musician experience, but from more of a technical standpoint, and I'll give an example. There's this, I'm just forgetting the name of the company, but basically it's a guy who created an AR app, which it basically lays out a room. You can be in a venue and it will tell you the best locations to put speakers based on input that you put in. And once it scans the room, it will be like, you know what, probably there, probably here. And you can sort of test out what it's going to sound like with spatialized audio where you place the speakers. Pardon for a little noise outside. Stuff like that. So from the technical side, from the recording side, here's this AR app that's really, really changing this experience of how you actually build out music in real time for fans later. What do you think about the background? And Amy, I also think that for when you answer, partially related also to the investing. Like, what are you looking for, and how does this change for people that are building technology for the music industry?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting things that are beyond just entertainment, right? Companies like Tribe VR, they're teaching people how to DJ, so you don't have to buy the $7,000 Pioneer equipment to learn. And so I think that there are a lot of other ways that spatial technologies can interact from a music and audio perspective, for sure. From an investment perspective, obviously, we're looking for companies that can scale and ultimately give some returns, and that's pretty common for a venture fund. From an angel side, I'm a little bit more flexible, and I'm interested in being more adventurous on pushing some technology forward, and I should be open. I'm an investor in Tribe and an advisor of Tribe, so
great, cool.
Checking that out.
As far as like Andrew, you're talking about the like trying to find like a proven platform. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but I was really enjoying watching the the live development process for Burning Man. I know Amy spent a lot of time before it actually launched, because it was a version of the Playa that was open for people to kind of come in while they were still testing everything. And I thought it was fascinating. The version I spent the most time in was in Altverse. So that was an established VR social platform. And it was definitely not ready for prime time, but I didn't care, because it captured some of that magic from Burning Man. I just walked around and talked to random people, and I thought that was fascinating. So I think that was an immersive moment that was part of, a little bit about the music, but a lot about that communal, atmosphere that you have at, say, like a festival that is so hard to capture just looking at a 2D screen. And so I think that the social aspect is part of it. And there are a lot of proven kind of models around how to be social. But I do think this is some very early pioneering days with things like immersive tech, like VR. I haven't seen anything on that level for AR or any kind of mixed version of that, where they're trying to combine the real and the virtual. But, like Andrew was saying about having 60 vibes, hopefully at some point we'll all have really amazing Apple or Google or Facebook head-mounted displays, like augmented displays, and we'll just show up to festivals and we'll have a very buttoned-up version of this. I think right now we're getting publicly beta versions of all that forced on us because of COVID.
Andrew, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The Grateful Dead were one of the first bands to really be widely bootlegged. People used to go into their venues with a tape recorder on one side of a row of chairs, a tape recorder on the other side of chairs, with microphones, and press record. And these guys bootlegged the hell out of their gigs. And at the time, everyone was like, "Oh my God, it's going to affect your income, and nobody's going to buy your recordings and stuff." But what happened was that drove an underground in collecting these bootlegs. And actually spread the notoriety of the band far and wider than if they just done their traditional sort of marketing and playing at gigs. And I feel those kind of disruptive things when it comes to live events and trying to capture the essence of live are going to be some of the things that drive our future with regard to social in these immersive environments. Because I feel like, for instance, some of the technology you were talking about there with being able to place speakers virtually in augmented reality, being able to estimate what's going on there. It's a similar tech to some of the things I've seen that have been, people like Ez Devlin played around with YouTube concerts and stuff, where location in a venue, you can basically pinpoint and move around inside a simulacrum of a venue and find the sweet spot for your own pleasure, like you would do at a normal gig. Trying to create social interactions with people at events, though, I think is as distracting as having social interactions with people at events, because usually you have the build-up, which is the social bit, and you can talk to each other and you find your place. Then when it's playing, you kind of don't want to talk to everybody next to you, and you kind of don't want everybody to compare notes on what's happening. You want them to be focused on the music. So I feel like there's some things we're going to have to sort of merge in and out of, because having too much permission and too much agency, I think, is probably bad. Because I think people will suffer like a mild form of ADHD, where instead of watching the concert in front of them or the musician, they'll be something going blah 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 blah. And I downloaded this, and what do you think of that? And I feel like we have to kind of have some kind of at least a simulacrum of the real experience, where we're focusing people's attentions and not giving them loads of agency in these environments.
So do you guys want to take bets on at what point we'll have tall people blocking our views in virtual concerts?
Oh,
Exactly.
it's happened to me already. I have photos of it where there's an avatar right in front of me. Yeah.
Somebody with a
Your
big hat
avatar
with a
should
feather
get
on, yeah.
smaller the closer you get to the stage.
Yeah, there should be a cheat.
That's the way to solve it. That's hysterical.
The nice thing I think
Go ahead.
about these virtual music experiences, and one of the things that I'm the most looking forward to, is just being able to share these music experiences with more people, right? With a sense of something being global, and whether or not it's something as literal as I can finally go to Glastonbury because I don't have to travel there and I don't have to, walk in the mud, but I have some sort of experience of what that is, right? And whether that's from an accessibility perspective in terms of travel or in terms of physical or audio impairments, like the ability to be able to share more music experiences with more people is the thing that ultimately I'm really inspired by.
I love that. Connected to all of this, touching a little bit on that and what Andrew was just saying, I have kind of a chicken the egg question for you. Do you think that it's the visuals or the audio, the spatialized audio, that's going to be the pivoting part of these experiences moving forward? And by that, I mean, I think a lot of people have this expectation, again, mitigating expectation with emerging technology, that concerts of the future are going to look like that incredible battle royale at the end of Scott Pilgrim, where his band is dueling the two DJs that are brothers, and they have a dragon come out, and then there's a gorilla, and it's incredible. That scene blew my mind. I was like, okay, this is the future of music entertainment. Done. I'm so ready for it. And we see places like the Wave doing cool stuff like that, where you can to somewhat control the visuals that are happening behind an artist. But in real life, and to Andrew's point about like a certain level of ADHD and control that the audience can have, I think sometimes you go to a show to get lost in someone else's artistic choices and not necessarily to make them. Isn't it enough interactive that you're there in person? So do you think it's the visuals, something like that, to really enrich an experience? Or do you think it's the mastery of things like spatialized audio and really putting out a significant amount of effort into audio, whether it's in virtual experiences, live experiences that are augmented, or virtual reality experiences? I know that's a big question. Feel free to duel. Feel free to say both. Curious about your thoughts overall.
So if I can geek out for
Pardon?
Yeah.
We're all gonna say both.
Oh, come on, make it a little more interesting. I want to feel
I'll
like
jump in
there's
there. I'll take Amy's.
chaos.
I'll take Amy's cue and just make it super geeky. I was watching an incredibly geeky documentary on PBS about how we kind of have two brains. They're always kind of functioning like a kind of a primitive brain that's just always aware of this generalized world around us. And then
I know
very
the name
focused.
of that. It's the bicameral mind. The bicameral mind.
Is that the movie?
Yep. So we're a kind of divided selves.
Yes, yes, the divided
got
self,
it.
the bicameral mind, yes.
Yep, exactly. So we always kind of have this like brain that's just kind of paying attention to everything. And then we've got the like higher functioning that's actually thinking. And the higher functioning part is very slow. And then the broader one is really fast, but it's more generalized. And if you've ever been suckered by like a new car salesman and you paid way too much for something, then that was them kind of hacking your brain, taking advantage of the fast talking side where you're not making a critical decision. So I think what's interesting is about music is it kind of hypnotizes us, kind of like a snake charmer in a way. And so I think it really is both. It really is like this combination, and there's a sliding scale for different people. I think different people have slightly different like parts of their brain that are cued into different things. But I really do think it can be a marriage of the two, where the audio hypnotizes us, lets us let go, kind of the way a movie creates a suspension of disbelief. And for that moment, we believe what's happening is real. So for different people, they're going to want to go on their own imaginative journey in their own mind, where they might be playing with all of these different ideas. They might be playing with all these different emotions. They may have shown up to this concert with a significant other and they're in love. And so they're going to have this romantic journey with the other person. They hold hands. Somebody else might show up and they've just seen that movie you just referenced. I forgot about that scene, by the way. That scene was amazing. And they might be replaying just all the amazing things they've experienced that day. And that's their way of kind of like processing their emotions. Sure. And so I think other people are going to be like there for that in the moment experience, and they're going to latch onto those visuals and they're going to get really drawn in. That probably depends on, what kind of substances they're on, but to each his own.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
It's interesting because when I was working at EMI, I basically plundered the Blue Note Jazz archive because I had all the Blue Note catalog. And so I was really fascinated by the fact that for all of the bells and whistles, you had these engineers who took two microphones and put them in a jazz venue, and they would have a trio or a quartet playing, and they would position the mics, and the musicians would play louder or softer. There would be no tonal balance or anything like that. And these recordings, the presence and the ambience of these recordings, these people playing acoustic instruments, like Wes Montgomery from the Montgomery Brothers, amazing record, if you ever get it, called Bop to Bop. And the dogma of that minimalism, I think, is really interesting because I remember seeing a Will Wright address Augmented World Expo a number of years ago. It must have been 5 or 6 years ago. And he said, maybe AR is not about what you put in, it's about what you block out. And I find that fascinating because we are living in a very distracted age with multifunctioning, multi-screened, everything's bombarding. Maybe some of the tricks will be to actually minimalize the amount of other stuff you need to focus on and really pull people into a moment where that magic happens and there's a connection, and I think that might be perversely some of the stuff I'd be interested in, maybe making it less of this orgy of light and sound and excitement, and maybe more about the poetry and the simpleness of something focused.
I think that notion of filtering out is amazing, because that's when we stop thinking about the technology and we start thinking about the storytelling and the emotions.
Absolutely. Like when I go to a concert, I actually shut my eyes for much of the time and listen, because that's why I'm there, and feel, right? Because it's also haptics. So you're also feeling it in your heartbeat and through the floor. And so I focus on those two senses and block out the visual. Because
it's interesting you talk about the vibration, because music obviously is an oscillation vibrations there. And Björk is a big fan of this, especially with bass. She's a mad bass junkie. And when we did the MoMA show, we had 52 Bowers & Wilkins sort of concert series speakers. And when we made Black Lake, we had a system called a wave field synthesis system. And we would be creating these pressure waves that really gave the intensity of the emotion of this very depressing song she'd written about her relationship falling apart. But what was really amazing was to feel the bass and the frequency and to feel the wobble of the air. And I think as a human emotion, to feel the music surround you is very interesting. And people like Subpack have been trying to simulate it with like backpacks, things like that. But maybe in the future there's going to be more preference, especially since we're all at home now. I feel like a lot more of these 5.1 systems, lots more bass reflex units, maybe soundbar technology and multiple speakers, just to try and get you into that pressure zone of the air wobbling around you. And maybe that's something we should also think about exploring for some of these shared concerts and things.
And I think that's interesting for all the hardware people that might be in the audience. If you guys are working on any headsets, like having really amazing audio, I think is something that's taking a back seat to the visuals on a lot of the head-mounted displays. So I'm looking forward to the days where we can get some, like Bose speakers and with sound canceling built into the VR experience.
Yeah. I know that when I referenced that talk that Amy and I did over the weekend, we were both screaming, shall we say, for spatialized audio to be prioritized more so in the immersive industry, because it's so powerful when it's done right. From earlier, when I started the panel, I had asked all of you who are some artists that you really love who are being innovative. Now I'm going to ask who's your #1 wish list artist to see them do an interactive show, whatever that might be. I know that I know that they've done it before, but I love Gorillas, and I just want to keep seeing them do incredible immersive interactive experiences. What about the three of you?
So I think just from a selfish standpoint, I really want to work with Donald Glover again, do some really awesome stuff to evolve all the stuff we've been doing. So I think hopefully there'll be some fun stuff in the future. So that's kind of on my wish list.
Love it.
Eric, I'll come and join you and we can work with them together.
I'll give you a call.
And also, I think selfishly, I would also love to see Massive Attack work in this medium more. They've been famously guarded about moving too far, too quickly, but I think they would do some really amazingly poetic things. Rob LaMeyer is a super savant lighting designer and musician and artist. And I think to see him fully work at the helm of those kind of things would be amazing.
Awesome.
I guess there are so many, but I guess I'll go with Janelle Monáe. She's done such a great job at creating a virtual world in her storytelling and in her music, it would be interesting to see her do more in this space.
That's a good choice. She's such a command of her visuals, so I second that. Anyway, thank you so much for coming to this panel. Again, I'm Darragh. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you to the VRARA. This has been a really wonderful time, and feel free to reach out to any of us afterwards if you have questions. Have a great day.